Could you believe it? John freaking Butterfield.
Welcome everybody to the show. I'd like to thank our co-host and fellow traveler, Dan the Dan Noodles man, the Steven Seagal of Wargaming, and our special guest tonight, Mr. John Butterfield. Welcome, John.
Hi there, everybody.
You're pointing the wrong way.
Good to see you. Who's pointing the wrong way?
Dan. And we're here to talk. Our special topic tonight is John's magnum opus, the Universe RPG from SPI 1981. I'm actually just kidding about that. I've been waiting to pull that joke on you for at least 6 months, just so you know.
Yeah.
No, what I wanted to talk about, and Dan suggested solitaire games because you've done a lot of work within the solitaire gaming space, but you've also kind of made it a sort of signature thing to do games that are solitaire games, but are playable from either side or just two-player. Yeah, I'm not really sure there's been a lot of other designers that have really done that.
Well, I think it's getting more common to have a solo mode in the box.
That's true.
I just saw on, like just today, GMT announced another game in the Twilight Struggle series about Twilight Struggle in Asia, and it said it's going to have two-player and it coming in the box a solo mode. Now I don't know if that's as detailed a system or as a full game or not, or it's a way to just, it's kind of a variant to the, I don't know, but
nobody knows. They just announced that literally today,
right
at like 3 p.m.
That's why it came to mind.
And I mean, John, all these games now having solo systems in a two-player game or whatever, a non-solo game having a solo system, which I think is great. But is it a marketing thing? You know, because some of them don't fare too well solo wise.
Well, I think for the other games, I don't know if you call it marketing, but it would be that games sell better when they have a solo mode in them. That as something, so something they can advertise that's going to be in the box as a solo mode. You know, according to GMT, for example, who I speak with a lot, Gene and crew, it definitely helps your P500 orders if you have a solo mode in the box.
That's why I'm saying that. That's why
I don't know if I'd call that marketing either. I mean, clearly I feel like that's just a reaction or response to the demands of the market, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of the expectation. Thin Red Line Games, which does, shall we say, very traditional hex and counter stuff, announced their new game today, which is Operational Ancients, by the way, and it's going to have a solo bot in it, or solo mechanism of some kind. I don't know, and that's like
Operational Ancients.
The campaign of Alexander in Persia.
Okay.
And so, why do they call it a solo bot? Like, John, your solo games are not called solo bot games.
Well, I bot has a meaning. I think a solo bot will stand in for the other player. So you're kind of still playing a two-player game, and there's a bot that's making decisions for the missing player, as opposed to a solo game design where I'm not trying to create a bot for a missing player. I'm creating a system that takes advantage of this being a one-player game, and there's a lot more fog of war and a lot more asynchronicity between the way that you play and the way that the system plays. Yeah. So as a bot, bot is really a stand-in for the missing player. That's my take anyway.
It's basically, it's an add-on. Basically, it's an add-on.
Yeah, and a lot of Euros have that now, like in like Wingspan, the game about birds, which is a very good game, that has a solo bot that allows you to play the game solo, but you're basically doing the same thing as you were before, just it's taking the place of a player. Or if it's a 5-player game, you could play it 4 players, or you can play it 4 players with a bot as the 5th player if you still want it to be a 5-player game.
Yeah. And this is all. Go ahead, Dan.
This is Wingspan you're talking about, right?
Well, that's an example, but in
all the coin games are other examples that
Right, exactly.
same thing.
So coin
Right.
games, you can play, if it's a 4-player game, you can play with 3 and have the 4th player handled by a bot.
And
And
you
does that,
always want, you can't just leave out a player in a coin game either. So
right. Okay, that's
I think
right.
you might be, maybe you can in Wingspan. I don't know. I have it. I have yet to actually play it.
And John, here's a personal question here. When you were younger designing games, were you attracted to the solo way of doing stuff, or were you just so nerdy that you went solo and you didn't care about anybody else type thing? Like, what attracted you to solo? And you do solo games so fantastic. It's like, when I play one of your games, it's like wearing an old glove. It's just, it's comfy.
It smell.
No, but it's comfy. It's comfy. When you play a John Butterfield solo game, I'm comfy. I'm happy.
All right. Well, that's good.
So I mean, what drew you to solo games? And I mean,
well, I'm going way back when I was at SPI. The solo part kind of came near the end. I mean, I had done many games that were 2-player games, either designed or developed. It wasn't something that was, I didn't plan for that to happen. It wasn't part of my grand design or anything like that. I mean, the first thing I did that had a solo aspect to it was the game Dawn of the Dead, which was a 2-player, simple game based on the film. And so there was a 2-player version, but the zombie player in that game was pretty restricted in what they were allowed to do because, they're so slow and mindless.
Shambling.
Thank you. So there's a solo variant in that handles all the movements and actions of the zombie side if you want to play it solo. So that was the very first thing I did solo. And then Jim Dunnigan designed Wreck of the Pandora, which was a game about, basically based on the movie or inspired by the movie Alien, where there's something running amok in the spaceship that you have to deal with. And then we wanted to do a prequel to that, which became Voyage of the Pandora. So we figured, well, that should be solo too, but it was a completely different, game because that was about traveling to planets and exploring and finding things. And so that was the first real immersive solo game I designed. And I really kind of went to town with it and made it a, narrative paragraph based thing with hundreds of paragraphs. And that begat Ambush.
That's a great question. That was a co-design with Eric Lee Smith, was it not?
Yes, that's right.
Okay. And because we have assumed, I think with some reason, that is a very difficult type of game to design, where it's like that paragraph style solitaire game.
Well, the system itself, I mean, I was primarily responsible for the design of the system of Ambush. But most of the work is in creating the missions. In the original game, 8 missions came in the box. So Eric and I split that up. He did 4 of them and I did 4 of them. And each one is like writing a short story, that can be experienced from the perspective of, 8 different characters in the squad or however many it was. So those were very complex to do. And to kind of manage your scripting, your editing, you're managing it and making it all work out logically. So, so we split that in half. He did 4 and I did 4. And then, I left Victory shortly after, well, actually before it came out. And then when they did all the follow-ons, it was so much work that they brought in someone to kind of full-time just handle their Ambush follow-on games. That was Joe Reiser.
How do you plot that? Not the plot. I mean, presumably you come into that with an idea of what that story is going to look like. But then how do you control? Because you've got all these little paragraphs that you can arrive at from various trajectories. Do you like flow chart that out on like this giant basketball court sized whiteboard, or?
Well, what I remember having is we would, for each of the missions, we'd have a binder that had like, I don't know, 30 copies of the map, the map that mission was on. And each one, we kind of filled in movement routes. Like in this stage of the battle, these are the things where the Germans, in the case of the AI side, you know, where they might be and where they might move. And we plotted that almost like each map represented like a chapter of the 10 chapter adventure. And that translated it. I don't know if you recall, you have this big card that looks like a spreadsheet that you drop into a sleeve, and you slide the card to a particular, I think it's a map coordinate and a time. No, the time is handled. So there was like 10 cards, you know, big cards, like, you know, the size a card like this big, that you would slide in, and each one of those card sides was a different stage of the story. There were like 10 stages, and some of them, depending on what you did, were skipped because that part of the story ended up not happening. But that one card would tell you what to do in any given hex of the board by sliding it back and forth. But before it became a card, it was the series of maps, so that we could plot it out visually and see what we were if we were telling the story properly, and if we're handling all the loose ends that might happen. You know, well, what happened if the guy moves over here? What's he going to see from there? Right? We had it, even if it's a stupid move, you know, the player might do it. They might send their soldier off into the corner of the map, right? If they do that, here's what they'll see at this particular point in the battle.
Did you ever during the designing of that game, did you ever regret you did that game?
No, but I had the, you know, temerity or the gall to leave before it was done. I mean, the game was done. I think there were maybe 3 missions still to be created for it, and I did one on my own time after I left, and Eric did the others. But I think that if you speak with Eric and Mark Herman, they'll say they regretted it. they then managed, you know, all the follow-on. And they're like, oh crap, we got to do another one and another one and another one.
Well, it was very popular.
Pardon?
A very popular game even at the time, and has an like a lot of Victory Games titles, and frankly, has enduring legacy today.
Were you involved in any of the modules?
No, not at all. I only saw them when they came out. I was not involved at all. I was.
So how did these guys
the different jobs?
So how did these people figure out the system? Because I can't
because Eric worked on it with me, so he knew it inside out by the time he had designed 4 of the missions, and he passed that knowledge along to Joe. And there might have been other people helping with it too. I don't know, but it was, you know, we had excellent in-house documentation for how the whole thing worked.
In-house documentation. That sounds so organized. I would love to have that at work.
Yeah,
that is literally my job at work, is to create the in-house documentation.
Well, I'm doing that again now with the Away Team game. You know, I have 2 writers working with me. We hired someone to actually manage the database, to create and manage the database, to track everything that can happen in the game. And so there's internal documentation that only the designer and writers and we'll see, you know, the development team. But there's a whole lot of stuff that the public won't see because we don't want them to know, you know, what's going to happen.
How the sausage is made, as it were.
Yeah, and you know, all the secret plot points. Yeah.
Now with all these like Space Core and the new game, with the Voyage of the Pandora, I think, if I'm not
No,
mistaken,
that's the old one.
Team.
The away team. Are you getting away from war type scenarios? You know what no?
No, I
Don't
can
forget-
do more than one game at a time. It's amazing.
Sorry, John.
Enemy Action Kharkov, which is, you know,
Sorry, John.
I think we would all agree as a core war game, even if it is, well, you know, whether it's solitaire or not, is immaterial, and it's, you know, solitaire or not, if you want. And that just came out, I think, last year.
About a year ago.
Yeah.
Spring.
No,
Yeah.
You seem to be in a system right now, and please, I'm sorry if I'm saying anything stupid, but I don't know what else to say.
Here it comes.
You seem to be in a system comfortable doing a solo, a 2-player, and a versus per game.
Well, it depends on the game. I think that's the point with the Enemy Action series, that it can be a 2-player game or you can play solo either side. With Away Team, it's really just a solo game. However, it turns out that more than my other solo games, even though it's solo, people love playing it together because you're making decisions for a team from, you know, anywhere from 2 to 5 crew people, and their robots are exploring a planet, and there's many decisions to be made, and the debate that 2 or 3 friends have with each other trying to decide what to do is really fun. I mean, every time I've tested it at the GMT warehouse weekend, I think it's going to be 1 player, but it ends up being 2 or 3 just arguing with each other. It's fantastic.
Sounds like dinner at my house.
Yeah, so I'm actually going to like promote that in the rules of the game and give guidelines of how to enjoy doing that. I mean, that's the first time I'll have a solo game where I say you should play it with more than 1.
There are plenty of games that people like to play like that too, though, to have kind of a. I mean, some solitaire like the Hunters. I mean, you can. Yeah, you could do it. You run like a wolf pack with 5 or 6 people at a convention. There's people.
I mean, that's the sheet you just pulled up, John. It was the Hunters, huh?
No, it was the back page of the rules for Space Corp.
I was close.
Good guess, though.
So, somebody asked in the chat about Battle Over Britain, which I actually have as well.
Battle Over Britain, the SBI/TSR game.
Yeah, the Spitzer title. And that's one of yours. And Mr. Fudpucker here says that you may have once said that it's your least favorite design. Is that true? And whether that's true or not, how did that design inform your later design? What I think was a later design, RAF.
Yeah,
RAF.
Pretty different game, but it's the same topic at least.
Well, I'm quoted as saying that's my least favorite design.
Well, somebody recalled that you might have said that.
I might have said that. And at the same time, kind of as you point out, I learned a hell of a lot from designing that game. So, yeah, so Battle Over Britain is 2-player only. And it's
a lot of hidden info, too.
Yes, and there's a lot of hidden info. The players, so there's like, you know, there's a map that only the German player sees and that sort of thing. So it took up a lot of big table space. It succeeded in doing what it set out to do, but I think it set out to do too much, because the original feedback proposal for that game, this was when SBI was using the feedback system that, you know, that they would put several proposed game descriptions for several proposed games in strategy and tactics, and people would rate them. And this proposal said it would cover the entire Battle of Britain with individual engagements, and Dave Isby wrote it. God damn him. I mean, and he laughed at me when he found out that I was going to have to design it, because we all realized that was like saying we're going to do the East Front at battalion level, you know, the entire, you know, something like that, where it was just a mismatch of the epic scope of it and the tactical level in the same description. So I kind of solved that in the game. But anyway, so that game was done. But then because of that experience, I gave additional thought to doing something with the Battle of Britain, and that ended up being RAF, because there I realized that the German player, in order to play historically, had to be an idiot. First of all, to even, think that they could defeat England in the air, and then invade.
Hold on, John. I'm confused here. England had nothing in terms of air force compared to the
They were
Luftwaffe.
outproducing aircraft at that time. They were outproducing the Germans in aircraft at that time.
Yes.
So, I mean, I know Mr. Churchill painted a very, very vivid picture in a number of speeches about it, but it was not just this massive German swarm defeated by a few valiant British defenders. The British had
that's the way you made it sound.
both numbers and time on their side.
For God's sake.
And the tactical situation was that the British
and the Germans were dumb.
The British fighters could spend their entire fuel in the air searching for and fighting, the German fighters. The German fighters had something like 5 minutes, when they were over English airspace. By the time they took off across the channel, they had 5 minutes to fight. Then they had to go home, or they were dead.
Or they were swimming home.
Or they were swimming home. Right. So anyway, so in RAF, I thought, I said the Germans had to be idiots because they were also the targets they chose to bomb historically, even though they were terrifying to the public, were actually useless in terms of winning that battle. They should have exclusively gone after radar and airfields that weren't too far deep inland, but they didn't. They bombed all kinds of different things, and I thought, to really reflect that in the game, I have to either give the Germans the ability to do something entirely different with historical hindsight, or make them a solo, make them the solo part of the game, and they are on this programmed strategy that can change over the course of the game, but that all of that is then outside the player, and the players, the British, responding and figuring out over time the best response strategies. And that's really what the game is about. So that's why I made RAF as a solo game at the time.
I mean, I would venture to say that and I have not asked him, but if I were to ask Lee Brimacombe Wood whether Battle Over Britain and RAF, but I think Battle Over Britain shows it more clearly, was an influence on the Burning Blue, I would think the answer would be yes. There's a lot of I mean, it's the same topic again, but there's a lot of parallels there.
Lee and I talked a lot about the games when I was doing the second version of RAF with Decision Games in the that came out about 15 years ago, because he became aware that I was doing it, and he wanted to let me know that since the time I had done RAF, there was a lot more information on the British side that became declassified in public knowledge, and it totally changed the understanding of how the British operated during the battle. And so he pointed that out to me. And so then I was very influenced by the research Lee had done regarding that. And that's why there are many changes between the West End edition of RAF that was done in the 80s and the Decision Games version that came out in 2009, I think.
So you were, I would imagine, the original RAF. You did that. Was that freelance work, I take it, for West End Games?
For West End, yes, that's right. That was a contract, and the West End at the time was being, or the design department was being managed by Eric Goldberg and Greg Kostikian.
Greg Kostikian, I knew had worked for West End. Eric Goldberg, I did not know that.
Oh yeah, he was running the. I mean, not on the business side so much, but on the in terms of the product, definitely. It was Eric Goldberg.
Hmm.
Greg did a lot of design for West End, and I did a couple things for them. And yeah, they were great to work with. And that was developed, the original RF was developed by Doug Kaufman, who did a great job developing it. Yeah.
Did you also do Battle Over Britain freelance for TSR, or was that designed?
No, I was on staff at SPI, and the
Okay.
game was actually finished before SPI went under. In fact, it was at the printer. Parts of it were at the printer. Then TSR took it over and got all the files, and they actually missed a round of corrections that I provided right at the end and didn't make those corrections. So there were some errors in there.
Imagine TSR screwing things up like that.
Well, yeah, so I wasn't actually a part of the print review.
Okay. That's interesting to know, because as far as I know, there was one person whose name is eluding me at the moment that took the deal to move to Wisconsin from New York. It was David James Ritchie, I think, took the job and went on staff at TSR.
He did go to work for TSR, but David had left SPI before like maybe 6 months, or the time frame's hazy, but several months at least before SPI's demise, maybe a year before. So he was already working at TSR when SPI was acquired by them, or the SPI's assets were acquired by them. Yeah.
The late David James Ritchie, by the way.
Yes, and he was a great guy. I really enjoyed working with him at SPI, and then crossed paths with him a few times after that. Really enjoyed his game on the on Kharkov called, what's it called? Lost Victory. Lost Victory
from GMT
game. Yeah, one of the earlier GMT games. He did that. Yeah.
So did you say that you are in fact designing multiple games at the same time?
Well, and now I am, because I'm retired from, full-time work for other people work. And so I'm now doing game design full-time. So yeah, there are like 4 or 5 things in the pipeline right now. I mean, 2 of them are done and coming out soon. The game Downfall, where I completed Chad Jensen's epic World War II design, and that is now at the printer for GMT,
as announced today.
And what scale?
It was announced today that it moved into the print stage. Yeah.
What scale is that? That's strategic.
Downfall is all of World War II in Europe, starting at the German high water mark at the end of 42. So the scale is armies and corps. Yeah.
That's about right.
It shows all of Europe, all of the Mediterranean, and Russia. Out.
I guess you would call this a monster game.
Well, it's 2 maps. It's not a big monster game. It's 2 maps, and the hexes are large. So it's a long game. I mean, to play the whole, it covers 3.5 years of the war. That would take you like between like a dozen, 15 hours, maybe two days.
That's really not bad.
There are shorter scenarios that you can play like in 5 hours.
Is there a large setup time?
No, it comes with scenario setup cards. It will probably take 2 players about 45 minutes to set up.
Child's play.
Child's play.
It took us 20 man hours to set up a game once. And actually, I think we might have broken that record this past February.
Wait, what game was that?
Case Blue.
Oh, okay. Enough said.
Yeah, so it took us 20 man hours to set up. We did it in one day because there were 4 of us, but it was.
And then did you play it for 4 days?
We played it for probably 6 months.
Okay.
And then I think it was like late 42 or something like that when we did call the game as a German victory. So we didn't play to the end of the campaign game. We played till the Russian player had had enough. And that was me. So I contributed to that decision. That was my first OCS game, by the way. Talk about dumb. That was dumb. So I've only got 740 pieces to move this turn. This is great. I love this.
John, is there any other your games? Can you talk about them? The games?
Oh,
that you
yeah.
have?
So I mentioned Downfall, and then the other game that's done is the game Market Garden, World War II Commander Market Garden, which uses the same system as my World War II Commander Bulge game published by Compass, which in turn is the board game version of the iPad game I had done on the Battle of the Bulge with, again, Eric Lee Smith at Shenandoah Studios. So that was an iPad game that came out about 10 years ago now, maybe 9 years ago.
You're talking about the Battle of the Bulge game? Your computer
Battle of the Bulge. It's a Battle of the Bulge board game, but designed to work in an iPad interface. And you play 2-player or solo.
You can also get it through Steam today, folks.
And now it's still available on Steam.
So, and I have it, and I played it, and it's very good. It plays like a board game.
All right, cool. Well, and then there's the board game version, which Compass published.
Compass, yeah.
4 years ago.
Yeah.
And now I've done a game on Market Garden using that same system. It's a very simple area movement game. It's one map. One board. It'll be mounted. It's a mounted board. Large, oversized counters. They're like 7/8 inch to a side.
And you're saying there's an app needed to play that game?
No, not at all. It's a board game. It's a board game. So those are the two that are done. Then I'm working on this away team game, which is huge. But also I'm doing a new edition, a new version of Hell's Highway, which is a game I had done for Victory on Market Garden, a much more detailed look at Market Garden with battalion-sized units. And that I'm doing with New England Simulations, Mark Hinkle's company. And I've always wanted to work with Mark because he makes the most beautiful graphics, I think, of any war game designer.
Literally handcrafted.
Yeah.
Will this be solo?
No, it's a 2-player game. It's
okay.
2-player or team game. You can play it with 2 people to a side. And it's 2 maps end to end, so it's long. And that is in play testing now. And Mark is just getting started on doing the graphics for it because he's also finishing up his company's game on EYAWTKAW, Winter's Victory, that he's putting through production now.
That should be showing up anytime.
Yeah. And then the 5th game I'm working on is the next expansion module for Space Corp. That's why I had these rules sitting out. So
that's your second expansion to Space Corps, is that right?
Yes, that's right. Because there's one also called Ventures.
Ventures, yeah.
Yeah.
Now, how big a revision will, or at least as you're currently seeing it, is the new version of Hell's Highway versus the Victory Games version, which is yet another one of those Victory Games classics that's still held in very high regard today. Other than the fact that I can no longer read the counters, it's a magnificent game.
Yes, well, for one, the counters will be larger and easy to read. Yeah, that was an unfortunate production error on the part of Avalon Hill back then. Well, that's a whole nother story. Anyway, so the different it is going to be not substantially different, but there are changes to many systems in the game that make it a lot more streamlined to play. It retains this offensive fire, defensive fire system, but it simplifies a lot of the other procedures in the game. And even though it's a 2-map game, it plays very quickly. I would say you could, if you had 4 people playing, you could complete the whole thing in one day.
Okay, that's actually another interesting feature that I've noticed of a number of those Victory Games classics is the playtime is surprisingly short for the kind of big meaty, like Korean War is. Joe Balkowski's Korean War design is like that too. You could play that in a day. I think it took us about 10 hours to play it when we played it a couple of years ago, which was my first time playing it. Frank Davis would like to know what your next monster game after Hell's Highway will be.
Frank and I think last spoke on the Ghosts of SPI show.
And we got to revisit that at some point. That's me holding that back more than anything else right now. I got a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah. I mean, speaking of that, I just had lunch with Danny Parker.
Yep, and I talked to Danny about that too.
Yeah. So Frank wants to know my next monster game. I don't have one in my mind at the moment. I have I have war games in mind, but not monster games. So I'm not gonna try to speculate what that might be. I do at some point plan to do another enemy action game, and it's been rumored. I mean, I'm considering that it might also be on Market Garden. Yeah.
So, I just take my money right now, John.
All right, good.
Seriously. That's one of my favorite topics. I think it's an extremely gameable situation. It's easy to kind of envision what the victory conditions for both sides look like, right? The Allies need to get to Arnhem, and the Germans have to not let them.
Right. But also the German army has to kind of survive. If in a Market Garden game, if the Germans play really aggressively and are always trying as much as they can to clog up the highway and things like that, there needs to be a price to pay in terms of, total destruction of the 15th Army, for example. And so I think it should be possible for the Allies to also win that way if they fall just short of Arnhem, but actually just destroy the German army, the 15th and the 1st Parachute Army that would have opened up as a
Will that game contain a German unit counter for the marching band?
I don't even know what you're talking about.
They handed a SS marching band weapons and said, "Your soldiers, you're going."
Oh, okay. Was that up near Arnhem or?
I think it was. Yeah. I mean, it would have been because that's where they were. But there's a counter for them in at least one company level Market Garden game.
Right.
And in our Market Garden game that we played a couple years ago, they actually killed a company of the British 1st Airborne. So.
Oh wow.
They won their tubas.
Which game were you playing?
This was the Devil's Cauldron.
Oh, sure. That's a beautiful looking game. I haven't played it, but
it was a great experience. Took a whole week to play, but it's a great experience.
And
Eric's.
Go ahead.
Eric here asks, if you don't want to answer this with a straight answer, that's fine.
You can't answer that.
I can't answer this with I can't give you a definitive answer. I can tell you who my favorite game designer is today, but and today it's you, John. Congratulations.
Yes, that's right.
I can't name one favorite game designer. I would put Mark Simonich in there, Mark Herman, the two Marks, and Chad Jensen for his great work. And, I'm just looking at my shelves here so I don't, forget someone I wish I had said.
This is always a danger.
But you see, I would definitely name those three as people who are still active in the. Really still active. Well, not Chad, but there is still some of his things coming out.
Will there be more Chad Jensen games coming out?
Well, he's another Fighting Formations is being completed by Kai. His wife and John Foley are working on that. And then he had designed a game that was on the Peak 500 a few years back called Golden Gate Park. And that is also now going to be published. I love that game. And surprisingly, the initiative system in Golden Gate Park is also used in Downfall, you know, because the subject matter is so similar.
Clearly.
Yeah, because Golden Gate Park is about, you know, getting the most out of a day in the park.
Mm-hmm.
I guess.
Really?
Yeah. So it's actually completely different from Downfall, but the initiative system works for both of them.
So Golden Gate Park, there's no paratroopers that are going to, Russian paratroopers are going to
parachuting into
there are
Golden
probably
Gate Park.
some balloons, you know, like you could, you know, buy some.
I don't get it. Are you joking?
And there's a, I believe there's a mime at some point.
That's deadly. That can be deadly.
Okay, I'm gullible here. I'm gullible.
Propaganda value. I'm aware of that. Yeah, I don't think we've seen. Well, we know there's Chad has a lot of designs in various stages.
That's what Kai said.
See, we're going to see plenty more stuff from the mind of Chad, even though Chad's no longer with us.
Yeah.
As speaking of awkward questions that you won't want to answer, because I would totally dodge it. William Bird asks if we're going to see you do another volume in the D-Day series from Decision.
I don't have any plans for doing another one. So at the moment, I would say no.
Okay, fair enough. That is an amazingly polite way to answer that question.
John, I want to ask you something about the D-Day series. The D-Day at Omaha Beach, first of all, is a fantastic game. I love it. I love it. I love it. Now, the other games that followed, I guess you must have licensed the mechanics or something, whatever. D-Day at Tarawa, Taipan.
Well, Carroll and Peleliu, I designed those.
Mm-hmm.
I did design those entirely.
Okay, so I don't know what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
so I did those, and then Decision wanted to do some more. So Joe Youst designed D-Day at Iwo Jima and followed that with D-Day at Saipan. And I consulted a bit on the Iwo Jima one, but it's not my design. And then I wasn't really involved with Saipan at all.
I remember someone asking Philip Glass, the composer. I don't know if you know Philip Glass, the composer.
Yes.
They asked him that.
What's his favorite game designer?
No, they asked him. They asked him that your music is, and John, with all due respect, please, your music is redundant, isn't it? And he was like obfuscated. What the hell are you talking about? But I understood what the interviewer was saying, and I know what Philip Glass was saying. Now you doing the Omaha Beach, was it a Taipan?
Taipan. Or
I even have the games.
Tarawa.
I have the games.
Tarawa and Peleliu.
And I'm asking you this stupidly here. Is there a redundancy in having those games? Or is it a completely... I haven't played the other two. Or is it a completely different situation?
I've played Peleliu and Omaha, and I think they play pretty differently, personally.
I don't mean to be insulting, John.
They play differently as battles. I mean, the issues you're dealing with are very different in the three games, but they have in common that they're all amphibious invasions against a fairly static defender.
Right.
And then once I'd finished Tarawa and Peleliu, I felt I had said enough about Pacific Island invasions.
Okay.
So I was done. I mean, that's what I was saying. And I don't, the system was not designed for, I did a Dieppe game too.
For S&T. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, that came out in S&T. So I visited that system 4 times, and that was enough.
Okay, so now that I've asked you that question, I'm going to go hang myself, and I shall return.
Well, I follow up on that. Oh, come back, Dan.
He'll be back. He always comes back. We can't be rid of him that easily.
It's like he just fell into the Atlantic. He's sinking. Like
he might have. If he's gone out for poutine, I believe.
Okay. I was going to say that, you know, some people have said that that system can be used for other types of battles. And to me, it's specific to kind of an amphibious invasion, a static defense, largely static defender. And, you know, I've mentioned this before. It's been suggested you could do a Stalingrad game using that, but I don't see it.
That's a good. That's an interesting suggestion.
Right.
I'd be interested in seeing if somebody wants to do that.
And well, and also the scale of the game is that the turns are representing like half-hour increments, hour increments. Whereas if you did that in Stalingrad, you could just do like 1 day of the battle or something, right?
Yeah.
But also in Stalingrad, both sides are maneuvering and coming into contact and out of contact, and it's just that's not what the system can support. Actually.
That was Dan's $25,000 toilet flushing that we just heard, I believe.
Oh yes, yes. Okay, okay.
He's got some amazingly engineered super toilet with Bluetooth connectivity, I think. So I had a question in mind and I forgot it because of Dan's shenanigans.
Well, I have something to say about the enemy action series.
Okay.
I've stated in the designer's notes for both those games that the 2-player game in both cases was designed and completed first before tackling the solo games. And that was very important to me to make the game successful 2-player games. They were intended as 2-player card-driven games with a novel combat resolution system. Yeah, so I bring that up because I just saw a review somewhere, a video review, that after the reviewers played the game, they assumed that the 2-player game was a slight kind of came after the fact as like a slapdash add-on and wasn't proper, it wasn't thoroughly tested. And so that's an opinion of the game, which is fine, but I just want to know that, yeah, maybe it appeared to be slapdash, but it definitely was not.
To what extent was that design, either enemy action game, because they're both similar in this respect, to what extent is that actually like 3 completely different games? Did it feel like that designing it?
Yeah, other than the order of battle and the terrain, they are they are completely different games, even though the player plays their side, you know, the active player plays their side as they would in the 2-player game. They play it kind of the same way as in the solo game. The other side they're interacting with, you know, behaves completely differently. It's not an attempt to make the AI side behave like the missing player. This is where it's not a bot. It's creating a fog of war situation where you don't know where the other side is unless you're in contact with them, right? And you don't know if the enemy has the capability to counterattack you now or not. And so I feel it actually recreates the battlefield condition in a much more kind of dynamic and gripping way than a 2-player game in which you see all the pieces and know the other person's resources can do. That so the solo game is to take advantage of the fact that the other side is a mystery to some extent.
So, John, when you make those games, a game with basically 3 games in one, because that's really what it is.
Yeah.
Is your fee tripled? And also,
that's a good question, though.
Yeah, you're damn right. That's a good question.
There's no fee. It's just royalties. Not just royalties, but
come on. I mean, you need an agent. You need me, John. You need me as an agent.
Okay.
I'll get you your Lamborghini. I swear to God.
All right.
Also, I don't know how you do that the three different, basically 3 different games, 3 different order of battles, not order of battles, sequence of play. And I mean, do you have this associative identity disorder? For God's sakes, man, seriously.
You mean to allow me to do it 3 times?
You're like the 9 Faces of Eve or something.
Well, anybody that
Jesus
solitaire
Christ,
games,
I mean, seriously, how the hell does that happen?
anybody that solitaires games without a solitaire mechanism, right, where you're just playing both sides, has to kind of have some of that, right? Where you have to kind of, okay, I have to detach from the Americans now and return to the Germans for the German operation, right?
But it's just
it's a lot of work, and
no kidding.
And it was 7 years between Ardennes and Kharkov, so that gives you an idea. And that was, and so I designed. I think I designed Space Corp during that same period, but that was about it. Unless I'm forgetting something. But it was like 2 years per, 2-player solo and the other solo.
So there's an answer for Paul Walker's question in the chat. You can expect Enemy Action Market Garden to appear sometime around 2029. Best of luck.
There you go.
And you know who used to do that, John? Like in the 1700s, you know who used to do that? Mozart. Mozart used to do that.
What, it takes 7 years to write a symphony? Is that what you mean? No, I actually don't. I'm wondering what the
correlation is. Well, the thing is, Mozart would have like six different works happening at the same time, and the thing is that at one point he had Don Giovanni, and which is not little peanut. Don Giovanni, it's a wicked opera. A clarinet concerto, another opera. It's like you got to be really able to disassociate, not to influence this, that. But I mean, whatever. I don't even know what I'm saying anymore.
Well, no, I think what you're saying, or at least for me, what I'm hearing is that one reason I like to have, a few things going on at one time is so that when I get stuck on one thing, and I do get stuck, definitely, I can I'll switch gears and go work on something else for a while and then come back to it.
Okay, so
I'll get some kind of either some input from another person or an aha moment or something that'll allow me to pick up the other thing again.
So there's no hyperactivity happening with you, is that right? Because to revisit something, in my mind, I can't revisit it. I've got to finish it.
You mean finish it once and then be done with it?
I'd be done with it.
No, I'm not that way.
Right.
We've got a pretty good question here from Frank Davis, actually, John, and this is a good question because I mean the enemy action games kind of do this where there's an offensive and a defensive component for both sides, but say the D-Day games that you mentioned that are sort of you're the attacking force against a pretty static defense that's in dug-in positions. How viable would it be to kind of take that basic approach, if not the system, right? You could always develop a new system for it and make the AI the attacking player and the player the defending position. I think that runs the risk of being boring, but
both enemy action games and RAF make the attacking side the AI. I mean, in RAF, the Germans are the ones attacking. In Ardennes, if you're playing the Allied solo game, it's the Germans attacking. And in Kharkov, it's the Soviets attacking for the first half, and then it's the Germans attacking for the second half. That's the simplification, but it sometimes works out that way. So that, calls for very different AI systems for the two sides. And in the case of Kharkov, it called for AI systems that switch in the middle of the game from being about, promoting offensive operations to promoting reactive and defensive operations. So that actually, made, I thought enemy action was going to be easier to design than Kharkov easier to design than Ardennes, but it turned out not to be the case, because partly because of that the roles kind of switch, and when do they switch it? What, what dynamics in the game, what milestones in the game are going to cause the AI side to start to think about switching from offense to defense, or maybe in part of the map still being on offense and in part of the map being on defense. And so that really complicated the design. And, but I love that challenge. It takes a long time to solve it to my satisfaction, but that's okay. I guess in the case of the D-Day games, that's definitely the case where the defender is the AI pretty much. But with enemy action, I really explored both sides.
What is the single topic that you've never done a game about but would love to?
That I've never done a game about, but I would love to. Until recently, I would have said a game on the dawn and development of civilization. But now there are so many of those games that have been done, even Euro games. I mean, there's complex Euros like, what's it called, Through the Ages. But ever since the original Avalon Hill game, Civilization, not the Sid Meier one, but the
Francis Tresham design.
Yes, when that game came out, I was floored. I loved it so much. And at Victory Games, it came out when, I think, right before Victory Games started. So we all at Victory Games played it a lot. I've been inspired to do something, not necessarily like that game, but on the same topic. And also thought about doing that instead of starting in the ancient past, but from here forward into the future, civilization out into the stars, which kind of Space Corp is a simplification of that.
Yeah.
The early stages, but it only gets to the point where you're settling, the stars in our immediate interstellar neighborhood. It's not really about, building empires or new cultures.
Unless that's in the upcoming expansion.
No.
Oh, okay. Because I'll buy that expansion too.
Yeah, I think that would be a different game.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but I mean, I could see, and this is kind of a characteristic John Butterfield thing, right? Where Space Corp's really got 3 different games in it that you happen to be able to play one after the other that segue into one another, right? So there's different gameplay elements in each of the 3 phases.
The scale shift to go from individual star systems to something galactic is
now I know that was that's based upon a novel you read, the Space Corps one, right?
It's a series of books. Yes.
Right. And do you know the video game called Ardy, help me here, the video game called Mass Effect?
Right.
I have heard of it. I've never played it.
Okay. I was just curious if you've played it and if that had any influence on Space
I don't
Corps.
feel I have played the Mass Effect games, and I more than once, and I don't know that I think, other than being science fiction and there being exploration themes, I don't know that I think they're tonally similar.
Okay,
let me put it that way. I think Mass Effect feels a lot more like Babylon 5 to me. What was this novel or series of novels, actually? Because I'm not sure I had heard that. That inspired Space Corp.
Oh yeah, it's the first book in the series is called Space Corp, and then there are others that follow. It's an attempt over several volumes to take space exploration from the Earth and the Moon, then out to Mars, then the asteroid belt, and then eventually out to I think the author's writing volume 4 now, and that's about exploring Enceladus, the moon of Jupiter. No, Saturn. That's one of the moons of Saturn, right? Where there's, I think, an underwater ocean and volcanic activity. But anyway, and then I think his next volume is going to go out beyond the solar system. Yeah,
I shall investigate this.
I mean, do they have audiobooks on this
I don't think
Disagree.
so. I think it's just been in print or on like Kindle.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the game
And the
through
author's
the
name is Einar Fulsang. Yeah, it says in the materials that come with the game, it identifies it. Yeah.
the game you mentioned there, Through the Ages, that's the a Vlada Shvatil game. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I've
Um,
never played that.
no, but I
Recently
do.
played some simpler versions of that kind of game. There's one called Tapestry, and then I played an older game when I was at GMT Weekend with Terry Coleman called Nations, which is also
I've seen
kind of
that.
a simpler civ building game.
No, there's a game. There's I've heard of Vlada Shvatil through Ignacy Chevicek, the guy who did Robinson Crusoe. Have you ever heard of that game?
Yeah, I have that.
And do you enjoy that game?
Well, I've only tried to play it, solo once.
And how many and you've died? Is that right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I just played it once, but I was also looking at it for how its mechanics work. Yeah, I do that with other solo games.
All right, John, we are over time, so I'm going to ask you one last question, and then
that
we're
went fast. It's been an hour. Awesome. Any more questions?
Your favorite game to play right now?
Right now, my favorite game to play. Well, I'm playing and enjoying what's it called? Ark Nova, the Euro game about making zoos.
Okay.
That's a lot of fun. But on the war game side, I'm just really enjoying playing Mark Simonich's game. I'm playing Salerno 43 right now and Holland 44. So I'm enjoying those on the war game side. Yeah, so those are kind of two opposite ends of the spectrum there. Yeah, Ark Nova. Here it is, Dan. It's about you start and operate and add your animals to a zoo. But you also establish relationships with universities and with global zoo associations so that you can take part in conservation projects. It's quite thoughtful, actually. Yeah.
I mean,
that sounds considerably more interesting than I was hoping, actually.
and John, what music are you listening to right now? What are you into?
Oh, I still listen to a lot of Beatles, but I just saw a show on PBS last night about a girl band from the early 70s called Fanny. They were almost huge. And so today I was watching YouTube videos of them. So
Fanny.
You never know. Fanny, F-A-N-Y.
All right.
There's a PBS special about them. Very interesting.
You mentioned the Beatles. There was a Canadian band actually from Ontario called Klaatu. Have you heard of them?
Yes.
Okay, that's all.
Yeah, I remember seeing their albums or album. Maybe they only had one. I don't remember.
Were they not like the Beatles? It's incredible.
Did they? Oh, okay. I was going to say
wicked.
That sounds like a prog rock act to me.
It is.
So, but I guess that that sort of qualifies. All right, folks. It's been a great tonight. I would like to thank our special guest, John Butterfield. Thank you so much, John, for spending this time with us.
Ardy and Il Duce, thank you so much.
And folks, we will be back next week. Our scheduled guest is Jason Carr, production czar.
Oh, give him hell.
That rhymes. There were questions I had written down for you, actually, that I'm like, no, that's a better question for Jason for next week. Actually.
Yes. All the awkward ones. Give him
No, trust me. Yeah. I got the Universe RPG beat for Jason for next week. So it's going to be good. So, folks, thanks for having us in your wargaming life tonight. We will see you all next week.
Big move.